hello. I'm here with another Q and A. I'm here with the artist Wendy Walker Silverman. I'm here at our show, A Brief Pause Between Two Mysteries, presented at Tinny Contemporary. Let's dive right into this. Let me start off with my first question. I want to know how might your audience engage with your artwork? So if you were to guide a newcomer, someone just completely new to you as an artist, new to abstraction and just kind of like the space in general, how might you guide them into experiencing your artwork?
I think that the best way to kind of approach any artwork is just to have an open mind. And I just really want to make work that, comes from an authentic place within myself. And I want it to be enjoyed, but I don't have any sort of preconceived idea of what I want someone to come away from after they see the work. I like to make work that's kind of open ended so that people see what they just naturally see in the work.
Yeah, I get it. Definitely like come to your own answer. Like you're not giving them the answer, you're sort of like laying the foundation to build their own.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was insightful. Let's move on to my next question. So I want to understand, uh, if I can recall during our last conversation, you brought up Paul Bernard, and I did a little bit of research into him and his sort of like post-expressionist values in his artwork. One in particular, I was basically able to see like his sort of color dynamics, his color placement in his palette, and I sort of drew the parallels with your current artwork. So I want to understand your own sort of color relationships and color dynamics. How do the say the artwork behind us, like how does the sort of earthy tones work, or
Mm-hmm.
how are they stand in relation to one another?
Yeah, so color is really a starting point for me when I walk into the studio. It's color that inspires me to get excited about going into the studio. And, this body of work, I think that the sort of continuum of the work is the palette. And I really wanted to explore different ways that I can use this fairly limited palette, from painting to painting. And you mentioned Bernard, and most of the work is really hard edged, but this piece behind you is an exception. And when I go into the studio to work, I don't have a set idea of what I'm going to do. I just kind of paint what I feel like painting in the moment. I typically have 4 or 5 paintings that I'm working on at once. So I worked on these two pieces at the same time, and I kind of worked back and forth between them. And, with my large scale work, this sort of more organic painting is kind of an outlier in this group of works. But I do a lot of works on paper that are more organic, like this big piece is. And, when we talked about Bernard, I was saying that my love of his work sort of came out in this painting. I love his huge canvases that there will be a central figure, but he does a lot of landscape around, and these post-impressionist pieces, they really start to almost disintegrate at the edges, and they become these abstract areas. And I think when you think about art history and you think about the movement of, going from post-impressionism to, say, the abstract expressionist painters, if you look at a corner of a Bonnard painting, it's very much like you see on a really large scale of the abstract expressionist painters. And I kind of was thinking about that when I worked on this piece. But to go back to your question of palette, Um, I think one of the consistent points in my work over the last few years has been using sort of a balanced palette of really intense, sort of bright colors, but they're grounded with the earth tones. And there's just something I like about the rhythm of having these sort of earthier colors as sort of a counterbalance to the really intense, vivid
Right.
colors that they're with. I feel like in grounding the paintings with the earth tones, I think that the vivid colors have more of a vibration that I'm looking for.
I see. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So, okay, then sort of following up that question as well. I want to. There was a lot of mentioning about this piece, illumination. So I want to understand, like, I know you mentioned you drew a lot from Bernard here. So besides the different inspiration, how else is it like so like I would call it loud? What really like went different within this process compared to everyone else? Like both in like the mark making, the presentation, like what made you even, feel comfortable putting this within the rest of your body work? Because it's just so, as I say again, loud
Yeah.
compared to everything else.
Yeah, it definitely has a different sort of timbre, I suppose. But really, what I thought about with these two paintings, I really saw these as being companions and being in conversation in the middle of this body of work. I when I delivered the work, Joshua and I were standing in front of it, and I said I had this realization that this world could be what's happening within this structure on a microscopic or a cellular level,
Yeah,
but vice versa. This could be the cellular structure of what's happening over here. And, when I'm working, I don't really question what my intuition is. I just make the pieces and for me anyway, sometimes, I'm surprised at how they do work together. And I think I've been painting for a long time. And I've only in the past few years started to just really trust that there probably is going to be a narrative in the work, whether I realize it as I'm making the work or not. There's a continuum that happens when the work comes together. And I think with this show, I trusted that that was going to happen.
I see. Yeah. There's that. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had to like take it in for a minute. I definitely like I'm drawing like a line between each work and just like the sort of flow that's happening here. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'll throw I guess say more straightforward question at you then. I wanna just know what is your meditative practice, or practices, or, you know, just how do you sit down, contemplate, and like engage with the world?
So I really feel like the painting process is a really meditative process for me. And I'm trained in a traditional style of work. My work was always representational, realistic, up until about 10 years ago. um, I studied painting. My concentration was in painting. I have a BFA in studio art. And I started working small works on paper. I started experimenting with abstraction on a small scale. And, I just kept wanting to make the works bigger and see how to translate that onto bigger canvases. And, working on paper with gouache or watercolor, it's a different experience than working on, canvas or linen. with acrylic or with oil. And so I've just been trying to sort of play with proportion and when I'm working in this style, I find that I can think about the things that I like to think about and meditate on when I work in this style. If I'm working realistically, I can't, my mind doesn't go to the places that I like for my mind to go to when I'm making art. And I'm just kind of compelled to make these hard edged pieces. I don't know why, but I really like making them. And sometimes in the midst of working on a bunch of hard edged pieces, I just really am also compelled to do something like this piece that's really loose and more organic. And it's sort of a relief from working in this style consistently.
Yeah.
And I allow myself to sort of explore those rhythms and to not question that.
Yeah, no, I get it, I get it. There's definitely sort of you took a reprieve
Mm-hmm.
from sort of like adhering to the sort of style that you like stay consistent with. There's always like as an artist as well, I understand sometimes just wanting to go against like the grain or like against your status quo, what you like always do. Like, what if I just do this differently one day, you know?
Yeah. And I think that, I think that's so important for a studio practice or any kind of creative practice or just life. And that's constantly saying, what if, what happens if?
Yeah.
And I love to ask that in the studio. I appreciate that you came to that because I really love asking that. And I get excited when I hear this little voice in my head say, wait, what happens if? And I know that something exciting is about to happen if I just allow myself to sort of explore that.
Yeah. Okay, okay. All right. Then let me thank you for your response. Let me move on to, I think, possibly my final question. So I wanna, before and after, I wanna your experience and perspective on your opening reception versus we're approaching your closing reception tomorrow. So what's that like? It's your exhibit has spanned, it's been a year
Yeah.
actually. So what's the experience been like so far?
Um, Well, there's always a cycle of when we're doing preparing for an exhibition. And it's kind of like we just passed the holidays. It's kind of like the holidays. You have all this anticipation, and then, it happens so quickly. Once the work is up, that time just goes by so quickly. And so sometimes there is just a little bit of sort of a relief, but also a little bit of melancholy, maybe, that the work is finished and the show's ending. But also it's exciting because then that starts a new cycle of going back into the studio and just starting fresh again with, just seeing what happens if.
Yeah. What happens is there's you can like I'm not like recreate, but it's definitely like you always come back to that moment of you're in the process of creating a body of work and then it just hits you, what if I do this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I see. I get it.
Maybe that's what I'll call the next show. What happens if?
What I like that. So okay, I think that's all my questions for today. I want to thank you for your time.
Quentin, thank you so much for your thoughtful questions. And I really enjoyed our conversations at the opening and today. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank Tina Contemporary for allowing me to host the space and yeah, that is today's Q&A.